Okay, great. Welcome everybody. I am Melissa Diamant, stepping in for Kim Polari today and facilitating this call. So I hope you can all be patient with me as I run through the technological challenges. So thanks for coming tonight. And I think I'm just going to go through and have everybody say hello. If you can mute your line if you're not speaking, that would be terrific. Okay, so I'm just going to go down in the order that it appears for me on the list. So Ashton, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Ashton. I'm the marketing specialist over at Rebel Media, and we handle marketing efforts for the port.
Great, thank you. David Quiros.
Yeah, hi everyone. David Quiros with the California Air Resources Board. I'm with the Commercial Harborcraft program. I manage the section. We're taking amendments to the board for a final vote next week. Nice to meet you all and be here.
Thank you. Davis Harper.
Hey all, Davis Harper with Climate Center, the San Joaquin County Community Organizer. Good to be here. Thanks.
Let's see, Jason Cashman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Cashman. I'm the Ports Environmental and Regulatory Affairs Manager.
Thank you. Jeff Robbins.
Good afternoon. Jeff Robbins, representing Martin Marietta Terminals here at the Port of Stockton.
Welcome, Jeff. Jolene Hayes.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to unmute. I'm Jolene Hayes. I'm with Fair and Piers, and it doesn't look like my camera is working. But I am helping with looking at the East Complex access, especially through Box Track neighborhood.
Great. Thank you. Julia Botello.
Hi, I support the Regulatory and Public Affairs Department at the Port of Stockton.
Thanks, Julia. Karen Romero. Karen, you're on mute if you're trying to introduce yourself. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Karen also works in our department.
Oh, got it. Sorry. Katie Chamberlain.
Hi, I'm Katie Chamberlain. I'm an environmental planner and I assist the port with CEQA compliance and regulatory permitting with Anchor QEA. Sorry.
Thanks, Katie. Kevin Campbell.
Yeah, hello, Kevin Campbell here. I'm Director of Operations for Brusco Tug and Barge. We provide tug services at the Port of Stockton.
Thank you. Kirk De Jesus.
Yeah, Kirk De Jesus. I'm the Executive Director of the Port of Stockton.
Margot Kraus.
Hi, I'm Margot Prouse. I'm a resident with the AB 617 committee in Stockton.
Thank you. Maria Mendez.
Hi, Maria Mendez. I'm actually part also of this AB 617 committee, and I'm actually on the board of SUSD, and I represent Washington School, which is on Box Trucks area.
Great, thanks, Maria. Melissa Houchin.
Hi, I'm Melissa Houchin with CARB, working on the Commercial Harborcraft and Cargo Handling Equipment Amendments.
And Monica White.
Good evening. My name is Monica White. I'm from Public Health Services.
Nicholas Tamayo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas Tamayo. I'm the Urban Forester and Urban Forestry Workforce Development Program Manager with Little Manila Rising.
Great. Renee, are you out there?
Yes, Renee Moylanen with Starcrest Consulting. We're assisting the Port of Stockton on developing a clean air plan.
Perfect. Shannon Arnold.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm the VP at Rebel Media. We support the port to communicate their sustainability programs and achievements.
Shannon. Sylvia Cantu.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Cantu. I'm a teacher at George Washington School.
Sylvia, I'm so glad you're on because I'm just sitting here trying to forward you the invite. I just saw your email and I cannot get it to forward. So glad you got it.
Scott Wall.
Good afternoon, Scott Wall with the California Air Resources Board. I am the AB 617 liaison to the Stockton community, and so that's my kind of attachment here to the Port of Stockton Port Outreach Committee. And I'm the one that's guilty of inviting a couple more CARB folks to the meeting this afternoon. I know that you were talking about commercial Harborcraft, which is not my specialty, so I want to make sure that if there were any questions about our regulations, that I'd have folks here that would be able to handle those on the spot. So thank you. Good to see everybody.
Great, thanks, Scott. Spencer Fern.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Spencer Fern, and I am the science coordinator with Restore the Delta, and also am part of kind of with the AB 617 group as well. So, thanks for having me.
Great. Willie.
Hi, my name is Willie Marquez. I'm just a community member. Thanks.
Victoria.
Victoria is also in our department.
Okay, great.
Well, sorry. I just realized I was muted that whole time. Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. I see a couple that I missed. How about SB Vielma?
Hi, good afternoon. Esperanza Villa, I go by SB, and I currently serve as the executive director for the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water and on the AB 617 steering committee, and a lifelong resident of Stockton.
Terrific. Edward? Okay. I think I missed. Oh,
Ed,
sorry, go ahead.
Could you hear Ed?
No.
Okay. Ed's part of the AB 617 steering committee. He's with Valley Pacific.
Okay, terrific. Jason Hattendoy, I think I missed you. Are you out there?
Hi, a little late, but I am here.
He's with the Port of Stockton as well.
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
great. Okay. And last but not least, the fearless leader of this evening's meeting, Jeff.
Oh boy. Jeff Wingfield. I'm with the Environmental and Public Affairs, Government Affairs work at the Port of Stockton.
Great.
So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to jump right into our updates, Melissa.
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple quick things. I know that there has been there's been a request, and Spencer, it came from Restore the Delta at one point. It was to provide the port water quality data on our website. So we've taken our first go at trying to consolidate and condense all of our reams of water quality data. And so if you go on the port's environmental page of the website and click under water quality, you can look at 2021 water monitoring data. And then you can also review February's, we do a newsletter, a stormwater specific newsletter to our tenants monthly. And so you can see the most recent newsletter that was sent out as well. So take a look at that. Let me know if you guys have any comments or any thoughts of how we can improve it. We want to provide meaningful data. And so if there's any concerns or anything else you want to see that could make us more transparent, please provide that feedback. Coastal cleanup. I am glad that some of the other folks are here tonight that helped with our previous coastal cleanup effort. We would like to start doing one quarterly. I know I mentioned this, I think last month or the month before, but we're really going to start. We just driving around, not within the port, but outside in the neighboring communities, and then in some of the more rural agricultural areas, we see massive amounts of illegal dumping. And a lot of that dumping is happening right adjacent to some of our waterways. And so while we've got some support or some staff there at the port that will go out and remove some of that, and we try to also make San Joaquin County Sheriff aware of dumping grounds when we see them. There's just never enough hands and willing participants to go around to clean up a lot of the debris and things that make their way into our waterways. So I want to say, so maybe with the help of some of the folks that were involved the last time, we can identify a Saturday in the next couple of months that look good, that we can all kind of volunteer and go out, and we'll offer this out to port tenants as well, and anybody else that we can get to go out with us, but will be very helpful to the local waterways. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Anybody who joined maybe at the last coastal cleanup? Okay.
Jeff, this is Margot. Just a
Yeah.
quick question. So how do you pick a spot?
Mostly from so far the way we've done it, and I'm open to any ideas. We know some historic spots that are kind of to the south of the port. They kind of come in the agricultural areas and pull up along next to Burns Cutoff, which is a waterway that is adjacent to the west complex of the port. It surrounds Rough and Ready Island. So we never have a problem finding dumping grounds there, unfortunately. But we're open. I think somebody else mentioned maybe the Calaveras the last time as well. So we're open to whatever we want to, whatever suggestions people have. And I want to say it was SB and
the San Joaquin Urban Native Collective and some others.
Yes.
From our group that helped
Yes.
out the last time, Jeff. This is SB, and so in terms of Jeff and his crew, like they were basically had everything that you need to get going, coffee, bags and gloves and the whole 9 yards. So just be prepared to like get a nice hearty workout in. So the same crew that we had, they'd actually been asking because they're all about supporting our waterways and making things clean here as part of our environmental justice mission. So we're ready to go for.
That is great. Yes. So yeah, SB and they brought a bunch of young people out that came and provided a lot of energy. We tried to help fuel that a little bit with some coffee and donuts and get everybody going out there. And so it was a really great team effort. So yeah, that's great, SB. We'll be reaching out again. And if anybody has an idea on dates that work, feel free to coordinate, please.
Jeff, I just want to point out in the chat for a second that Nicholas Tamayo commented that LMR's urban forestry cohort could also be available for this effort.
Oh, awesome. Great, Nicholas. We will definitely hit you up for that. We can hopefully, and yes, thanks SB for putting that in there as well. Great, we'll note that. The other thing, I will actually, so I know that Jolene needs to go early tonight, so I will ask her just to give a brief update on the traffic study. So the focus of that traffic study is really to look at options for moving and providing another access point so that port trucks do not have to go through the neighborhood. And so Jolene's in the early stages of helping us try to figure out a plan to make that happen. So if Jolene, if you would give us a brief update. I know we just finished some contractual issues, so you haven't had a lot of time, but if you could just give us a brief update.
Yeah, it's been a short amount of time, I think about a little less than a week, but we have managed to get counts ordered. So traffic counts at a few locations will be ordered out there, and we're coming up to do a field investigation. So I know there are a few people that are on the call that mentioned last time around that there were some truck lots where trucks were being stored or parked within the neighborhood itself. We started to take a closer look at that, figuring out who owns the properties. Is it county or city jurisdiction? If any of you are willing to meet with me when I'm up there next Thursday afternoon, please let me know. You can put it in the chat and I'll make sure that I reach out to you after this. I'd like to identify as many of the issues as I can so we can understand what's really driving the cut through traffic of trucks. If it's the East Complex operators themselves, or if it's something actually within the neighborhood that needs to be addressed by the city or county. One other thing that I've been able to do in the last week is we are doing some work for the county on looking at overall truck routing throughout the whole San Joaquin County area. So we are coordinating to so I'm working with Fatima, who's been leading that effort with the county to make sure that that communication is crossing between port, county, and city, so they're all coordinated on this issue. I think that's about it for now.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is anybody who has, so one of the things that we want to reach out to and touch base with is community members. So I know some recent folks joined the AB 617 group, and I don't know if they are here tonight, but I think that a few of them are within the Boggs Track community. We would love the opportunity to talk with them. I see Jessica Olson from the Valley Air District is on. I don't want to put her on the spot, but if maybe if no one else has ideas or connections to those new folks, I think Jonathan typically has, and I don't see him here. So Jessica, you think you could share like some of the email or something for some of the new folks that joined that might be within the Boggs Track community?
Absolutely. And I think even just something we would share maybe with the whole CSD, if that makes sense to you, Jeff, maybe just as a reminder of this committee, but also especially pointing out that because there might be some folks that maybe don't remember or haven't been as involved in this that we can remind, but certainly maybe highlighting it for, there's about 2 or 3 of the new people that are in that area.
Great. Yeah, that's what I thought. So that would be perfect. And then Maria, the other thing I think Jolene and I are interested in are touching base with folks at Washington Elementary. I've been reaching out to Catherine to get a meeting about ways that we could potentially partner with the school on certain measures. But one of the other things we wanted to touch base on was traffic. So I don't know if you can carry that message back and maybe see if you guys are available next Thursday to touch base briefly. That would be really helpful if possible.
Definitely, because the school district is on spring break this week.
Okay, good.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I will send you an email and see if we could line up a time to meet. So the other thing, we've got 2 port tours coming up. We've got a group tomorrow, and then we've got another group next Thursday. So Jolene is going to also join us for the next Thursday tour, and so we'd like to get feedback from others that are on that tour, and then from there we'll go on to have additional meetings. So. Jolene, was there anything else on the traffic study, or is there anybody else who has questions or input on the traffic study at this point? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jolene. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to move into, I think we had, TC NorCal. I know Jonathan had emailed me and he included a number of you on an email about the opportunity to utilize some time at the POC meeting today to talk about some of the comments that were submitted. So I just did want to respond back and let you know that we have not had a chance to really provide and develop any meaningful responses to those comments at this time. We really appreciated all the input, and we were looking at other ports and how they've developed community benefit packages and programs. So we think that's a good opportunity for us. And Jason, I don't know if there's any, Jason or Katie, I don't know if there's anything else we wanted to say at this point. We're really developing cost estimates and schedule and scope for addressing those comments. And anything else, Jason or Katie?
No, I mean, I just want to, also thank everybody for submitting the comments. And, I thought they were a lot of very good comments that we received, and I'm looking forward to responding to them. It just there was quite a few comments, so we just want to make sure we take the time and respond appropriately and meaningfully.
Yep, and I'll just add that we have already had one meeting to look into the community benefits agreements, and have another one scheduled for next week. So I'd say we are moving with momentum, but it'll just take a little bit of time before we're ready to loop back.
Anybody have any questions or any thoughts there? Okay. Melissa, does that pretty much cover the updates section, or is there any other updates from the group that people wanted to highlight?
That covers it for our side, Jeff.
Okay. Okay. With that, let's move into Renee's portion. As you guys all know, one of the biggest efforts of this group is really to develop the clean air plan and identify emission reduction strategies that we can implement now and into the future for not only the port, but our tenants and also other ways we can partner with the community to reduce emissions. So Renee, would you take it away?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once again, just wanted to remind everyone of the process that we're going through. Next slide. We've done a lot of work already. So a lot of background about how to put together clean air plans, different kinds of strategies, implementation mechanisms. And now for the next few months, we're going to be starting more of a deeper dive on each of the emission sources. So we're starting today with Harborcraft. Next slide. So a little bit of background about Harborcraft in the Port of Stockton. So first of all, Harborcraft is anything tugboats, workboats, crew boats, anything that's not an ocean-going vessel. In Stockton, there are 6 assist tugboats. You can see a picture here. These are the tugboats that help get the vessels lined up on the berth and guide them in. There's a couple of opportunities coming up around Harborcraft, and I know we've got Kevin from Brusco who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities specifically in Stockton. But one of the big things is that the California Air Resources Board, which is the state agency that oversees air regulations in California, is amending its Harborcraft regulation. I'm getting feedback. Is that me or?
No,
I don't think maybe someone could mute. So the state does have regulations requiring Harborcraft to install cleaner engines, and the state's in the process of amending those regulations to require even more stringent engine standards. And one of the key elements is that tugboats would be required to replace their tugboats or repower to what's called Tier 4+, and I'm going to talk about what that means. But it's basically the cleanest engine you can get today, plus a diesel particulate filter, which filters out particulate matter And if you remember, particulate matter we're very concerned about because that's where the health risk comes from. And as proposed, it has not been adopted yet, but as proposed, the phasing in would start to begin in 2024. And there's, a whole phase in schedule depending on the type of Harborcraft and the existing engines. And maybe the CARB folks we have, David, who's on the phone, could give us an update on that at the end of this presentation. So that's a huge opportunity coming up, is that the state is going to be requiring much cleaner Harborcraft over these next 10 to 15 years. Next slide. So in Stockton, this is the contribution of Harborcraft to the overall emissions in Stockton. Harborcraft contribute 8% of the nitrogen oxide emissions, 13% of particulate matter, and 5% of greenhouse gases. So not the biggest source category, that's still the ocean-going vessels, but not an insignificant amount of contribution to the emissions. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned Tier 4 for engine standards. Just a brief bit of background, the Environmental Protection Agency sets standards for emission standards for engines, and they get progressively more stringent the higher you go in numbers. So Tier 0 is the dirtiest engine, Tier 4 is the cleanest that's been approved by the EPA today. And this chart is showing you what this kind of looks like at the Port of Stockton. So it's looking at the activity, how much activity is happening at each of these tier levels. So 16% of the Harborcraft hours at the Port of Stockton is done by Harborcraft with Tier 0 engines. So that's the dirtiest engines. 41% are done by Tier 3 engines. So that's how to sort of read this chart. And the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 are very clean. Compared to Tier 0, the Tier 2s emit 60 to 65% less particulate matter and NOx. And then the Tier 3s are 80% less particulate matter, 70% less NOx compared to the Tier 0. So that's pretty good. You'll see that there's no Tier 4 Harborcraft in Stockton, and that's not surprising. There are not many Tier 4 Harborcraft out there today. So this part is not surprising. But what we do see is that a majority of the hours in Stockton are performed by Tier 2 and Tier 3 vessels. So that's good news. Next slide. But what we really want to do is focus on these Tier 0 and these Tier 1 vessels, making sure that we sort of move away from the use of these higher emitting engines and shift more of that activity toward the Tier 2 and the Tier 3. Next slide. So we've had some discussions about maybe what we could do for the clean air plan here in Stockton in terms of the Harborcraft emissions. And as I mentioned, we are probably going to have this state regulation, which is very aggressive. And so what we're looking at doing in Stockton is really accelerating this state regulation where we can. So going after grant funds potentially for repowering or replacing the Harborcraft in Stockton to the Tier 4 plus, maybe even doing some zero emissions demonstrations. Zero emissions is very much an emerging technology for Harborcraft. Another thing is making sure that all of the Harborcraft are using shore power, which is, and you may have heard this term with regard to ships, but Harborcraft also use shore power. When they're pulled up alongside a berth, instead of idling their engines, they plug into an electrical outlet on the shore, and that allows them to stop idling their engines, which reduces emissions. And then we also want to look at ways of phasing out these Tier 0 Harborcraft. So that could be incentives, it could be requirements. There definitely needs to be more discussion about this, but that's sort of the direction that we could move to sort of nudge out these tier 0 Harborcraft. And I should note that the reason why, even despite the state regulation, there are tier 0 Harborcraft in Stockton is because there are exemptions in the state regulation for very low use vessels. So these tier 0 engines cannot exceed a certain amount of activity in the course of a year. But that said, they're still allowed to run up to 300 hours each year. And then another strategy that we're looking at is establishing some slow speed zones near the homes and community facilities indicated here. And that's also not only helps with emissions, but helps with noise as well. Next slide. So that's just a little intro about Harborcraft. Next month, we plan to talk about trucks. And I know that we do have Kevin from Brusco on the meeting today, and he's going to give sort of the operator's perspective on Harborcraft and tell you a little bit about all the things that Brusco is doing to reduce emissions as well.
Yeah, so maybe, I don't know if you guys have questions now or you want to wait till after Kevin talks to Matt. You've got something?
Sorry, that hand is obnoxious. I wanted to ask Renee, the slide where we threw out percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're losing
Yeah.
your audio, Matt.
We can't hear you. Want to type it? Yeah, type it in the chat and we'll check it out from there. Okay. Melissa, I don't know if you see any other hands.
I don't at the moment.
All right. Well, why don't we move on?
Sorry, Jeff. Here's Matt's question.
Okay.
He was hoping to see tons per year in the percentages from the initial slide.
So the tons per year, I did not put them on the slide, but I pulled those percentages from the 2018 emissions inventory, which does have, I think it was about, if I'm recalling, 15 tons per year of nitrogen oxides in 2018 from Harborcraft and 0.65 tons of particulate matter. And I can put that in the chat if that's helpful.
Yeah, Matt, the last information that we have and was from the 2018. We are working on our 2020 inventory, and based on some of the things you hear from Kevin, I'm hoping that you will see a benefit there because they have done some improvements, but we've also been busy as well. So is there a total vessel count?
There's lots of, so there's 6 assist tugs in Stockton. There's also, I would encourage folks to look at the emissions inventory. There's a lot of really good information in there from 2018, and I know we're updating it for 2020. And it's not a ton of reading. It's like 3 pages on Harborcraft. So it's well worth looking at that, but there's good info. I see another question about the tier 0 and the tier 1. So the state Harborcraft regulation does require upgrades depending on the age of the vessel to tier 2 and tier 3, but there is an exemption for Harborcraft that run less than, and I'm pretty sure it's 300 hours a year. David from CARB might be able to correct me on that. So cumulatively, there's a fair amount of activity in Port of Stockton from tier 0 and tier 1 Harborcraft, but on an individual Harborcraft vessel basis, those engines are not running more than 300 hours a year. But it does make a difference cumulatively.
Hi, Renee, this is Willie. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm the one that posed the question. My hand's raised too. I'm not sure if you saw that. But so Can we go back to the chart with the tier 0 and tier 1? So you're saying even though we do have 16% in tier 0, even though we have 16% in tier 0 and 24% in tier 1, the number of hours that they're in operation is under a certain standard that allows us to continue to go. So then wouldn't the true analysis here be like volume of how much volume output from tier 0, how much volume output the tier 1 to get a sense of the true emission?
Yes, and the emissions inventory takes that into account. So the tier 0s and the tier 1s are disproportionately represented in the emissions they contribute, which is why we want to move them out. This is just giving you a sense of the hours that they're operating, and it's the energy consumption hours, which is a little bit of a nuance for how to look at these, but it's just this is to give you a sense of the relative activity levels at the different tier levels.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so I mean, really what we would need to take a look at is the hours of operation, which isn't really reflected here.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was referring to. And then the second question I have is, as we consider the tier 4 vehicles, and I know there's a state grant on it, but like, so for the port, I'm curious, like from a cost benefit analysis, like for tier 4, once we get those new Harborcraft, like how long does it take to actually pay off versus a tier 0, which I'm sure is like depreciated significantly. And I'm just kind of curious about like the time horizon that each of these vehicles pay itself off, because just want to make sure it's like sustainable for the port to afford a tier 4, given the, I don't know, the higher upfront costs and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think Kevin from Brusco, who's going to speak next, would be the best person to speak to the business case, because I think you're exactly right. I believe, and Kevin and I were chatting about this earlier today, and he can correct me, that about $15 million for a new tier 4 plus Harborcraft. Is that right, Kevin?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So, yeah, I can speak to those. We've just completed the construction of our 4th tier 4 tugboat. So I've got dollar amounts on those vessels comparatively to our tier 3 tugs. So,
I mean, I guess we don't have to dive into the details, Kevin, but I'm just kind of curious at a high level, is it financially sustainable for the port to support tier 4 vehicles?
And I'll tell you, that's the biggest problem, because when you're in these smaller, we call them niche ports, you don't have the traffic of an LA Long Beach. So to be able to support a tier 4 tugboat, in a smaller port, you've got to raise your rates accordingly to be able to afford that piece of equipment in the port. So at this point, it's not viable for Stockton at our current rate structure. So like I say, I can go down through the equipment that we have in Stockton at this time and just give you an idea of what we're doing, and I've got the cost of what we're doing.
Yeah, if it's okay with everybody, maybe we could just have Kevin go ahead, and then we've got David here, which is great, and some of the other staff for Carb and Renee, and so maybe then we could kind of go around the horn a little bit and talk about potential costs. But so Willie, just so you know, the port does not own any tugs at all. These are 2 private companies that operate here, and so while we are happy to work with them and help support them and go after grant opportunities, and we can help in that way, and that's what we intend to do. The port itself does not own any of that equipment.
And also does not have a contractual relationship at all with the tugs. The shipping lines hire the tugboats directly, which makes it even more difficult for the port to sort of insert itself into the process.
So then the cost of the higher, more expensive tugboat would be put upon the shipping lines potentially?
Yeah, I think Kevin could maybe answer that.
Yeah, that is correct. And a shipping line, usually they do not ask what tier your tug is. They just want to know your rates. So
gotcha.
It's okay. Well, I'll go ahead and run through them then if we're ready for that. Just
Yeah,
to kind of give you
appreciate
an
that.
idea of what we're doing in Stockton. So anyway,
Kevin, can I also there was a question in the chat about zero emissions Harborcraft, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well when.
Yes, yep, I absolutely will. I'll let you know what we have in our fleet and what we're doing with them. So just to start out.
Matt, sorry to interrupt. Matt, we'll come back to your questions. I know you still have a couple in the chat.
Okay. All righty. Well, like I say, Brusco Tug and Barge, we provided tug services to the Port of Stockton for over 30 years. And I'll give you an example of what we're doing to upgrade our fleet. As you know, we want to be good neighbors at the port. We've been there a long time. Our crews live in Stockton and the outlying areas. So we're pretty well invested into the community. But just to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing, we currently have the Cleo Brusco that is providing ship docking services at the Port of Stockton. We just in 2017 we repowered the Cleo from a tier 1 engine package to a tier 3, and that was at a cost of $1.5 million. And that tug is currently operating in Stockton on a daily basis. And then the Belinda Brusco, we actually purchased that tugboat in 2020 for a price of $1 million, and it's tier 3 engines, and it is in Stockton and providing ship docking services daily. And then we have the Sharon Brusco that was repowered, and some of these costs, like built into this cost, we put new gears in it, which are what turn the propeller shafts, which in turn, of course, turn the propellers. That tug, which was done in 2021, that tug came in at $2.5 million, and she's tier 3. And with the arrival of the Sharon Brusco, we had the tier 0 Julius Brusco, and the Sharon Brusco replaced the Julius Brusco. So the Julius has left the port, and we now have the Sharon there. So those are the 3 tier 3 tugboats that we're running daily or whenever we have business there at the Port of Stockton. And then we have the tier 0 Angie Brusco that's moored in Stockton, and that one is one that is limited to 300 hours per year. We try not to utilize that tugboat, and it is now scheduled to go out of service June of 2022. So the Angie will be leaving Stockton here in a few months. So that'll leave us with the 3 tier 3 tugboats. And then we have a tug named Captain Bob Campbell. We just purchased a tier 3 engines package for that tugboat. And with the gears, that was $650,000. And then we're just waiting on shipyard availability. That tug is up in the state of Washington right now, but it'll go to a shipyard probably in Portland. The tier 3 engines will go into that tug, and then that tug is destined for Stockton, which would then take the place of the Angie that will be gone by then. So that's what we've done. So, you know, since 2017, we've spent $5.6 million in the Port of Stockton to tier our tugs and to stay compliant with the harbor carb requirements, etc. So that's a rundown of what we have in Stockton at this time, and you know, I'm happy to take any questions.
Melissa, can you advance the slides? I don't know if it's me, but I'm still on the home slide.
And I guess, you know, I can talk to the tier 4 too, because I'm sure there'll be some questions. But the one issue with repowering to a Tier 4 package in these tugboats is you've got to have extra room in the engine rooms because you have to have a DEF tank on board, which is it's a diesel exhaust fluid. Then that actually gets pumped into your exhaust. So some of these tugboats, the way they're built, and with Coast Guard guidelines nowadays, you can't add that tankage. So that's why you see us going to the Tier 3 and the repowers. The new builds that we have completed that are Tier 4, those are going into the bigger markets because, again, the price tag on those are right now I think we're at 14 million with the last one, but with the price of steel, you can't even get engines right now. They're back ordered sometimes up to 6 months. Just with the COVID and whatnot, it's quite difficult right now to actually build a tugboat and try to keep it on schedule. But that's the price tag on the latest one that we just launched here a few months ago. So again, we'd love to see a Tier 4 tug come into the port of Stockton, and we're always keeping an eye on it. And we're in contact with the port and looking at traffic levels and that type of thing. So anyway, that's what we're doing.
Kevin, do you want to talk about zero emissions at all, where you see that going with
Sure.
Harborcraft, maybe generally and then specifically in Stockton?
Yeah, absolutely. As of right now, there are some hybrid tugs around that they've been trying to get the technology right on, which are a diesel with a battery backup. And then there is a fully electric tugboat being built right now. It's called the E-Wolf. It's being built by Crowley, and that tug is going into San Diego. It's being built over in the Gulf right now, and right now they're at about 26 million for that tugboat, and then there'll be about a $3 million shoreside charging facility for that tugboat, and it can run for 2 to 3 hours depending on what type of bollard is required when they're docking ships. So those tugs are up there pretty good in cost right now, and I think the industry's looking forward to seeing how that tug operates, and we work closely with Crowley in other ports, so I've got a pretty good line of communication with them. But at this point, the price of those tugboats and with the lack of facilities to charge them, I think there's a little ways to go before we see fully electric tugboats. But this, like I say, this E-Wolf tug, it's one that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I would say, Kevin, from our discussions, I think that Stockton potentially could be a good option for an electric tug, just with the shorter range. So,
absolutely.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. A port like San Diego and a port like Stockton, they work well for a fully electric, because you can't run them for too long, because you only get so many batteries into a tugboat, and of course you're pulling a lot of amperage when you're looking to provide what's required of a tugboat when you're handling ships. But in Stockton, you've got short runs, so we're not out a long time. We might be out an hour, maybe an hour and a half with a ship job, and then we're back to the dock. So the Port of Stockton would definitely be a candidate for a fully electric tugboat. Whereas, like, if you're in Puget Sound and you're running from Tacoma to Seattle, or out to Port Angeles, or up to Anacortes, they just don't have the capacity yet to be able to do that.
Yeah, and similar, I would say that diesel electric is probably not ideal for Stockton, because we've got you guys are under power most of the time, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the diesel electric, Foss had built a couple quite a few years ago, and one of them they had some major issues with, and they turned it back into complete diesel. But what it virtually is you've got your diesel power, and then they can they can call on the battery backup. So it provides that extra power. And if they're running from job to job, they can just go down to the batteries and run it at, say, a 5 knots or something slow like that. So they are out there. It's just they have not been very popular because, again, they're having a hard time with the technology on those things.
Got it.
And then we have a question from Willie.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So what is the timeline of potentially phasing out the Tier 0 and Tier 1 tugboats?
So we don't have any Tier 1s in our fleet. The Tier 0s, we had 2 of them. One of them departed Stockton last year when the Sharon came in. So that would have been August of 2021. And then our last Tier 0 tugboat, it will be departing on or before June of 2022. So that boat's got a few months left and then it'll depart.
Got it. Thanks, Kevin. So what is that, maybe, I don't know if this is a question for Jeff or Renee, but what does that do to that percentage breakout of the emissions that we showed in that previous slide with those two Tier 0 tugboats being decommissioned this year? Does that bring us from like 5% to like 2%? Or I'm just kind of curious. We know what it is current state, but what is it based on these 2 tugboats being decommissioned?
Yeah, I think we did a very rough estimate that it would almost cut the emissions in terms of tonnage in half. I don't have the figure of what it would do to the percent contribution of Harborcraft to the overall emissions in Stockton, but there is another operator. Brusco is not the only Harborcraft operator. There is another operator that has Tier 0 and Tier 1 tugs. So even though, and I think Kevin said that Brusco handles maybe 75%, certainly more than half of the activity in Stockton, but there's still, even with Brusco moving to all Tier 3, there's still another operator that's running Tier 0 and Tier 1, which is why we need to have sort of a bigger discussion about that. But it's going to help significantly.
Gotcha. And do we have like by year 2025, we want to hit 4% or 3%? Do we have that kind of benchmark that we're aiming towards?
I think that's one of the things that we need to think about in developing this clean air plan.
Mm-hmm.
And really have some discussions.
Yeah, that would be kind of the goal is, okay, how are we going to identify? And so today's discussion and having our interviews and our discussions with the tug companies will help us to try to figure out what's logical, what we can do, and how hard we can push in the next few years. Okay.
Okay, any more questions for Kevin? Sorry, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, David, I don't know if you saw any question. There was one question about why are Tier 0 and Tier 1 Harborcraft still in use today. Did you want to give any background to the development of the state's Harborcraft rule that could potentially answer that?
Yeah, we can do that if it would help. Melissa Houchin from our group is on the line and can talk about the low use limits and how that's changing.
Yeah, hi, this is Melissa Houchin. So with our current Harborcraft rule, we have low use exemptions in place that allow operators to continue operating with the engines they currently have as long as they're under certain thresholds. We are changing those thresholds now with the amendments that we are proposing to the board. It's not yet adopted, but what we're proposing is to change these thresholds to be related to the engine tier. So cleaner engines would get more hours. So a Tier 3 or 4 engine would be able to operate up to 700 hours per year under the low use threshold, and then a Tier 0 would only get 80 hours per year, I believe. And then those thresholds would then be cut in half if they're operating near disadvantaged communities as well. So then those sturdier engines like a Tier 0 would only get 40 hours per year. So I guess just to recap the answer to the question of why are there still tier zeros, likely because they're operating under low use thresholds, which are about to be lowered for tier zeros upon adoption of the proposed amendments.
All right, thank you. So these are all kind of tools that we're looking at, potentially putting into, the emission reduction plan, the regulations, as well as, any mechanisms the port can do to advance the regulatory requirements. So any other questions before we move to the next?
Hey, Jeff, I don't know if you already went over this, but what exactly are the levers that the port can do? Obviously, you guys don't own it. You work with Brusco and other tug companies, but like, what have you guys done in the past? What can you guys do? Do you guys like offer subsidies, like discount on fuel? Like, what does the port have in its control?
So we have tariffs, and I don't know if Jason Katindoy wants to talk a little bit about tariffs and that mechanism. We have tariffs and leases is essentially the way we can kind of enforce requirements on our tenants and our tenants. Jason, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, that's right. But I think, this is in line with, a lot of what Kevin shared. One of the things that the port's looking at now is our partners, such as Brusco and such as Seaway, who is the other tug service provider. What we're seeing is, vessels are, in addition to rates, which Kevin mentioned, they're also interested in, how powerful the ship assessed tugs are. So this is something that this is a discussion that we'll be having with Kevin and Seaway in support of not only, increasing emission reductions or getting cleaner equipment up here, but also more powerful equipment up here to add, more capability to our tug fleet in assistance of our pilots who bring ships in and out. So,
yeah.
Jeff and Jason, that makes sense from a port perspective and what levers we can pull. I'm just kind of curious, and the same question for Kevin and Brusco Tug. Like, what do you need, or what for you in a good partnership with the port do you need to like be more efficient, to be more, to be sustainable? Like, what have you asked, or what do you need from the Port of Stockton relationship to kind of grow in these goals that we have for the environment?
Well, I'll tell you, it's all about, you hate to say it, but it's all about revenue and, what type of equipment can you afford to park there? Because there are no other revenue opportunities in Stockton for us, but ship docking and occasional barge assist. So it's rate driven on what we're able to provide, and not just Brusco, but it can be any tug company anywhere. It's all about your rates and or traffic levels, and Port of Stockton has done a very good job with keeping the traffic levels up, and that's why you've seen since 2017 we've invested $5.6 million into our fleet there, besides the cost of the tugboats, but those are upgrades. Because we have faith in the port and what they're doing, and we've increased the bollard on our tugboats while we're doing the repowers, knowing that, as ships get bigger or pilots have more requirements. I mean, we see it in other ports that we provide the same service, that you've got to increase the bollard, which is what a tug can pull or push, capabilities, while keeping it in a compact tugboat, especially in a port like Stockton, where there's not a whole bunch of room for big tugboats. So, I think with that, it's just a matter of, if the pilots come back or, in their dealings with the port, and they want to set a certain bollard, then, the shipping companies will have to provide additional payment to the tug company to be able to provide those tugs. So I mean, it's a fine line. Like I say, the shipping companies love to get low cost ship docking, but there is a cost of doing that business. But I think here, you know, we've got a great relationship with the Port of Stockton, and I just feel like we're definitely going in the right direction.
Yeah, what we're really working on right now, Willie, and what you'll see in the clean air plan is we're taking a hard look at ways we can incentivize getting the cleanest tugs possible here. And that will be a partnership with looking at every grant opportunity that comes up, and meeting with our tug companies to see if they are ready to move into the next phase, and continuing to push on getting clean equipment, the cleanest equipment we can afford. That'll be the goal.
And, you know, just to add to that in terms of the business case, you know, having a state regulation come in with more stringent requirements for everyone really helps to level the playing field too. So, you know, depending on what that final Harborcraft regulation looks like, it could force everyone to come up to a similar standard. So it raises the cost of business. It raises the cost of doing business in California, but equally for everyone. Which could also help.
So we're constantly looking for opportunities. I mean, Renee in the chat put, you know, the different types of grants that are out there. Some of them work for us, and some of them don't quite fit and have some disadvantages that some of our folks we can't live with. But we're turning over rocks every day to look for additional dollars to partner and to bring to our tug companies.
Then one last question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to read that question. So.
Oh, sure. Okay. There's a question. Last question, Kevin. When the Tier 0 tugs leave Stockton, where do they go?
Those tugs are going to be decommissioned. So we literally just took. That. Well, yeah, it's kind of a tug heaven, but we literally just had 3 of our ocean tugs that just made the sad trip down to Ensenada, Mexico. So they'll be cut up and the steel will be resmeltered and ready to rip again. So, but yeah, so they'll be decommissioned and done.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Is that it for Kevin? Is everybody good?
Yes. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Kevin.
So we're going to move on to Shannon Arnold from Rebel Media for a presentation on green marin.
Hey everyone. Hopefully at this point I'm a familiar face. I work with the port on a number of initiatives, but the green marine is personally one of my favorite projects to work on. It is the largest environmental certification program that's voluntary in the maritime industry. And I think that's a major key differentiator about this program is that it is 100% voluntary. It addresses key environmental issues, both locally as well as continental issues, in a very inclusive and transparent process. It offers a framework to create a baseline and a pathway to reduce the port's environmental footprint, and addresses concerns around air, land, water, and other forms of pollution. This program was designed initially for ship owners, ports, terminals, seaway corporations, and shipyards. But as you can see, you can also be an association or a supporter or a partner of the program and really voice your concerns or weigh in on it. And they aim to be as inclusive as possible with the development of the key performance indicators and the criteria. There are now nearly 400 members in the program, and that includes 200 participants all over the world, and 32% of that are ports. So the Port of Stockton initially joined the program and submitted verified data for the first time in 2018. So we're using 2018 results as our baseline, and that's how we measure our progress as we participate each year after that. So overall, there are nearly 1,000 performance indicators, and they do change annually. The program aims to get more stringent over time. And I think that's one of its key benefits is they're always improving it and making it better. And next slide. Perfect. So in order to receive certification, participants have to benchmark their annual environmental performance across multiple resource category areas, and then have those results verified by a third-party accredited external verifier. So that verifier goes through and does a complete audit, and then the results are made public. So they are available on the port's website right now. And they're also published internationally through the Green Marines channel as well, and through one of their online publications. So for ports, there are 8 different resource category areas, and then within the category, there's 5 different levels of achievement. And there's a certain level of key performance indicators, or KPI. If you see KPI, that's what that acronym is. And those groupings of KPIs have to be justified in order to achieve the next level up. So sometimes they're very specific, and they might say like complete 3 out of 5 KPIs in this category in order to move on. So each one is very different and specific. So for example, this image shows what a level 4 and 5 criteria look like in the Green Marine, or in the GHG emission category area. So in order, for example, for the port to achieve a level 4, they need to complete the an annual port emission inventory and develop a GHG reduction plan. So be on that annual basis of continuously reporting their emissions, have the plan in place, and then in order to achieve level 5, a clean air plan or equivalent needs to be defined with time-bound reduction targets and measures that will show the progress in reductions in comparison to the baseline year, and achieve an annual reduction in GHG emission intensity greater than or equal to 1%. So it's very specific, and this is exactly why this is where we're putting most of our attention into the emissions inventory, as Renee talked about, and the clean air plan, of course. So this is a key resource category area that we're aiming to improve on in the immediate future, and where we aim to see the greatest improvements in environmental footprint and, of course, community impact. And next slide, please. So this image shows the distribution of port participants and their overall level of achievement across each category area. So we can see that the data clusters around level 2 as the key performance indicators get more specific and strenuous in the higher levels. It also varies by participant. So let me also, since that word's kind of tiny, I'll read you the categories. So there's aquatic invasive species, greenhouse gas and air pollutants, spill prevention and stormwater management, dry bulk handling and storage, community impacts, environmental leadership, waste management, underwater noise, and then the newest category, community relations. So those are the categories that every participant has the potential to evaluate their impacts and justify if they have completed or fulfilled the criteria. So in a general sense, the program is looking for ports to monitor regulations. That's what you see pretty consistently around level 1. Then level 2 and 3, they're looking for the port to create policies or programs to ensure compliance or moving beyond compliance. And then the higher levels are looking for strategies to be in place to make incremental annual improvements in that resource category area. So for the Port of Stockton, underwater noise happens to not apply to the port because of where it is geographically. Since it's a freshwater river, that category is generally looking for noise reductions and speed reductions. And as Renee mentioned in the last POC meeting, vessels tend to already navigate at a slower speed because they are being navigated by the pilots, and it's a rigorous narrow channel. So that's kind of interesting. That's specific to the Port of Stockton. So let's take a closer look at Stockton's results on the next slide. Perfect. Okay, so here you can see the overall results distributed by year since the port joined. 2018 results were verified, but because of the pandemic, they weren't verified since. So we are currently in a verification year. We can see an improvement in the GHG category area between 2019 and 2020, and that's when we completed the first GHG emission inventory, and that set them up on the pathway to eventually be able to achieve level 4 and 5 once the Clean Air Plan is developed and implemented. So that's something that I personally love about the Green Marine program, is that it really does provide that roadmap and gets you on track and provides the pathway forward. We can also see major changes in the environmental leadership category due to several key performance indicators that had cascading effects. So some of those included creating formal policies, such as an environmental and sustainability policy, and then developing plans that commit the port to sustainability standards and adopting internal practices to maintain operational changes that support sustainability. So at the same time, the program introduced a new and more strenuous KPI. Oh, okay. More strenuous KPIs are introduced each year. So that's why you also see some changes in environmental leadership and I think community impacts. That's not shown in our level changes, but there are significant changes every year. So in this most recent verification, we saw changes in spill prevention, community leadership, and GHG. I believe they just changed the order of some of the KPIs. So there are always changes that we have to take really close attention to and make sure that we are fulfilling the KPIs in a very clear and justifiable way. And then, like I said, those results get verified by a third party. So since we are in a verification year, this year on Earth Day, the third party verifier will take all of the port's justification statements and their proof, which is physical documents, photographs, and then also take a physical tour of the port. And then he will evaluate all that and make sure that the reported levels and statements that we submitted are true. And then once that process is done, then the results will be posted on the website. So the whole process for this year will be completed around May. I have one more note that I just wanted to highlight. So one of the changes that we saw in the last couple of years with leadership, that got incredibly more strenuous. So in order to move up a level or to achieve level 4, I believe, you have to have an average of level 4 across all other levels, all other categories, excuse me. So the port currently has an average of 3.16 based on the 2020 results. So it's possible that in the future we will be able to progress as other categories also improve. So I think that's kind of unique. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. So, well, I already covered this a little bit, but in short, this is how the process works. It's very strenuous. It takes months to complete. We basically conduct a full audit. So the port and their environmental department goes through, identifies all of the documents, processes, takes photos of things around the port. We collect all of that information, write up the justification statements for each KPI, so thousands of them across the categories. We submit all of that supporting documentation through an online portal, and then we coordinate with the verifier to then do another audit of that same information. Then that verifier submits a final report, and then the Green Marine program reviews that as well. And then occasionally they also audit the auditor for quality assurance. And then the results are published, and this process repeats every 2 years. So the only hiccup in the 2-year process was, of course, the global pandemic. So after this, we imagine that we'll be back on track for every 2-year verification. So what's next? We could do the next slide. The community relations category is brand new, and I'm very excited about this because shortly after the port initiated this very group, the outreach committee, the Green Marine developed and launched this new collection of key performance indicators. So it's optional for the port to fill out this category, but we'll absolutely be taking part in it. As you can see, the objective is just to improve the overall relationships and be as transparent and open and communicative as possible. So I think this is a strong testament to the port's authenticity for trying to create this group and for the objectives that we're hoping to achieve. I think it's a fascinating coincidence that they came out with this new category, and I'm very proud that we're forming this group. And I wanted to offer a personal sincere thank you, because your participation and the authentic relationships we're building together actually will influence how we participate in this category. So thank you all for being here.
I do want to say they're completely coincidental. We had no idea that that's not why we started the POC. I'll just tell you.
That's what I think it's funny, honestly. I was happy to see it pop up because it is in alignment with what we were doing. And that's one of the reasons I'm very proud of what Jeff and his team have done creating this group, because it is a little bit ahead of the curve. Okay, so what's next? Oh, you could go to the next slide, please. We are planning to, of course, improve across all resource category areas. Oh, did we skip a slide? That's okay if it's not in there. The next steps are to complete, of course, the third-party verification, and then the development of the Clean Air Plan and the continuous reporting of annual GHG emissions will help keep us on track in the GHG category area for improving in levels in that resource category. For the community impact category area, our plans to improve include just tightening the documentation process for how the port handles new policies and plans that affect the community. And of course, participating in the new category, community relations. That's all going to be new in the next calendar year. But of course, since we're having this conversation around the GHG emission inventory and the Clean Air Plan, that's where we're going to see the most effort put in and the greatest improvements in the years to come, because that'll have cascading effects across the other resource category areas as well. So I think we should have a few minutes for questions. I know I kind of jammed through that.
While we're looking at that picture, I did just want to say that I don't know if I talked about this last month, but that's a picture of our East Complex charging station that we put solar panels on with the help of PG&E. And so up until a couple of months ago, the bill at the charging station was running about $1,400. And since we've implemented the solar program there, we've actually been getting a credit back from PG&E. So our equipment is actually cargo handling equipment that runs over here is actually running on sunlight. So that's cool. And another thing we're getting ready to do, I've got a couple items going to the board next week. One of them is to participate in an Energize CEC, California Energy Commission program that will, it's a grant program, 50-50 match that will allow us to get additional charging infrastructure. And so when we did the ZANZEF program, we had to cut back on some of our wish list because it was just too expensive to get how many fast chargers we wanted to. And so we went with some level 2 chargers in an area where we wish we had fast chargers, but we're going to attempt to try to get additional fast chargers to locate at this facility and other areas throughout the port. And also it comes at a time when we really need them, as SSA has purchased an additional 12 heavy duty zero emission lifts, and they've been receiving those. So that's encouraging to see not only the port, but its tenants reaching out and investing in additional zero emission technology. I would also say, so just the other thing for the Green Marine program is we get additional points, I guess, for encouraging our tenants to also become members. And so I'm hoping very soon that we'll be able to announce one of our tenants who is joining Green Marine. And for any of those other tenants that are on this call, please consider putting your programs through this review. I think it's helped us really to take a hard look at what we're doing and areas where we can improve. So, no other questions about Green Marine?
We don't have any hands raised or anything in the chat.
Okay.
I'll ask a question. So for Green Marine, I'm trying to understand the whole business aspect of it. So is there like lower tariffs associated with it? Are customers or tenants more attracted to ports that have the rating? Like, how does it work from like a driving incremental revenue perspective?
I don't know if I can answer that part of it, but the port does pay to participate. So it's a sliding scale based on revenue tons. So they pay a fee to do this. So not only is it voluntary, but it costs them. And then having this, I think, it's a bargaining chip if that is something that's important to the supply chain. I know that just as a trend, there's more of an urge to see transparency across supply chains, and people are asking for sustainability and for zero waste and low emissions or carbon neutral products and supply chains. So I think it could be a bargaining chip or potentially attract customers if that was part of their core values as well. Jeff, anything to add there?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have not looked at any way to really monetize it. I think that, and I think that was asked of me by the previous port director is, okay, well, what does this do? Well, in my mind, it really helps us to take a hard look at all of our programs to make them better. It brings in somebody from the outside who, we might sit and look at our programs and say they're great, and compare them to other ports in California. But to have somebody come in and really go through your program, kind of, it tests you a little bit. And I would also say that that's a good point to bring up is, okay, well, maybe we can incentivize some of our other tenants to look at this program, and maybe that's something we can include in the clean air plan is, okay, maybe there's some incentive we could provide for tenants that join Green Marine.
Sure.
Yeah, I think all that makes sense, Jeff and Shannon. I think from a community member perspective, personally, I don't see the value because I'm not in this business 24/7. Like, it doesn't really impact me. For me, I might, if I'm doing like a research project, and I see the Green Marine certification, then maybe that gives me peace of mind as a tenant or a community member here. But as somebody who's thinking about it from like a business perspective, I think Shannon, your point about, hey, we're potentially courting a potential tenant. Let's show them in our marketing materials that we are Green Marine level 5 on XYZ, and maybe that wins the business. Or I'm also thinking, the other question I had in mind, which wasn't exactly the answer that you mentioned, Shannon, but I was thinking maybe because you are in Green Marine level 5 and in categories XYZ, you pay less in XYZ taxes or something along those lines. So I was just trying to understand like what the incentive is here. I understand from a perspective of transparency and more accountability, which is great. But I just wanted to kind of see if there were incremental business impacts as a result of getting a level 5 in all fields in all categories.
No,
Sure.
we don't get it. We don't get a benefit, but it could be that at some point, we would provide that as an incentive for some of our tenants.
Where I see the real value is where it's a roadmap. So I think it has helped accelerate and build momentum in certain program areas. Like, for example, this GHG emission inventory. There was a huge incentive for the port to engage in that contract with Starcrest to do the inventory and to commit to doing it annually, because it's not a requirement to do that. but this program offers you some sort of reward in that you're moving up in a level, you're showing your incremental improvements, you're being held accountable. So I think that it provides major value there, just from it being a roadmap. But if it's used like you're suggesting in the future, I mean, that's something for Jeff to, I guess, analyze and discuss and figure out. But I think from a roadmap perspective, I've seen it make major improvements, and it's also a great way to archive initiatives as they come up and find a way to make those impacts harder hitting or even more impactful. So another example could be like the South Ditch project. So that fits well into the stormwater category area. So as we go to justify that and we have to make incremental annual improvements in that category, we can look to other programs and say, okay, where else can we put more energy or effort to improve it? And what will that benefit be? Even if it's just incremental level improvements, it's still something to help guide us down that road.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Shannon.
I'm going to ask all the other port people online not to listen to Willie's justification that it makes no business sense. Because I think Willie, that's a good point. But what we're starting to see now in folks that we are dealing with, and this is like it's great. It's music to my ears, and that we're starting to see and talk to folks who they care about programs like Green Marine and showing a dedication, and that we're trying to do the right thing. And so those are the kind of people that we want to do business with. So it helps, I guess, kind of flush out some of our goals, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And yeah, I don't, it's not implied, but but I think, yes, a level of accountability to the port to voluntarily do this to Green Marine. Yes, that's one level of accountability. A second level of accountability is if you tie a revenue number to it, then you know that you need to work on XYZ initiatives to grow incremental revenue by building more partnerships or building more exposure, or putting the Green Marine badge on all Port of Stockton marketing material. Like, for me, that would be another level of accountability, saying, hey, we have this badge, we reached level 5, let's tout it as much as possible on our social media, on our digital presence, on our flyers. And like you're saying, building that relationship, that just means like we need to be accountable to meet and maintain level 5, because that is why the tenant moved in. That is why we've held such a long partnership with each other. And that's why we've recruited more partner or tenants to join the Green Marine program. So I think it's just like another, you can do it voluntarily. You can put less effort into it since it is volunteer. But, if you have numbers tied to it, then it like makes you strive more to reach that level 5, which is something you should brag about, because obviously a lot of other ports don't have that.
Yeah, we were actually the second port in California to get Green Marine certified. I agree with you. We need to tout it more and probably make it more visual. I was holding this up because I do,
cool.
and I'm proud that we have it on our business cards. But yeah, you're right. We could do better at kind of promoting that. So yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think there's a slide for this, but I believe we are at the wrap up next steps phase of the meeting. So Jeff, is that something you want to lead us through?
I do just want to thank everybody again for coming and participating, and I look forward to the upcoming tours. As always, reach out. I know, Mary Elizabeth, we're still struggling, and I will to get you out here, and I know that we've identified a general time frame when you're going to be more available, so we're going to continue to push and as soon as possible to make that happen. But looking forward to seeing other folks. Mary Elizabeth, has anything changed on your end as far as availability? It's still like I know you have multiple jobs, so we're trying to work around that.
No, I'm just down to one in volunteer work.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great.
But the night job you wouldn't be having night tours, so that really.
It would be a little tough.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do it, but
No, not necessary. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, that you could have a full moon tour.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, does anyone else have anything else they want to say before we sign off and see some of you tomorrow and next week, and we're going to identify a date for our coastal cleanup event, and we'll send that out as well.
This is Margot. I just want to say it looks like you're moving to Zoom next month.
Yes, I think
Because I clicked on that before I figured out that, oh, nobody's coming in, something's wrong, and I needed to look a little further.
yes, we're making every effort to switch over. We had a couple technical issues on our side, but I think we've worked those out, and I think Julia and Karen, we should be able to pick up on Zoom next month. Is that the plan?
Well, you sent out the schedule starting next month, so.
Yes, that is the plan.
Wonderful. All right. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you either out at the port at the next AB 617 or here next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.